Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Elizabeth. Hi, everybody. Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth, for putting this together, and thank you for the invitation to speak here today. I've decided to give my presentation today on the hiding of an advanced ancient civilization and why this is relevant today. I'm Michelle Gibson. I've been a blogger and YouTube content creator since June of 2018. My blog is on my website, which can be found at .com. And my YouTube channel is at Michelle Gibson 8946. I was born in July of 1963 and raised outside of Washington, D.C. in Montgomery County, Maryland. I was born just a few months before the Kennedy assassination in November of 1963. And that may or may not be important information, but I have a feeling it might be, because it seems like a lot of things started to change around that time. I received my bachelor's degree in social work and psychology from the University of Maryland in Baltimore County in 1989, after having served in the United States Army from 1982 to 1986. I've lived in many different places throughout my life and have traveled extensively. My research following cities and places in alignment all over the world led me to finding out how the original advanced Old World Order was transformed into the globalist New World Order. And so the presentation I'm about to give really follows along the line of how I even came into doing this work, because my main 3 points of sacred geometry, ley lines, and the Moors was where I actually started in June of 2018 when I started blogging. How did we arrive at the world we live in today? Was cruelty, great suffering, degradation, racial and religious division our inherent nature and destiny? Or was humanity at one time highly advanced, and then the original order of society turned upside down, after which time we've been the subjects of a vast human and social engineering project, not for our best interest, but that of negative beings who wanted nothing but total power and control over everything. I firmly believe there would be no mysteries in history if we'd been told the true history. I'm going to start this presentation with the role of sacred geometry and ley lines for the original ancient advanced civilization. The placement and design of ancient cities and sacred sites was influenced by sacred geometry and ley lines, which align with terrestrial energies as well as celestial energies. Sacred geometry is a language of geometric patterns that span all cultures, timelines, and species on Earth and beyond. It is the foundation of everything in existence when broken down to the smallest parts. This is the flower of life pattern upon which it is based. It is the creation pattern of the universe, and when you connect the centers of each circle, you find all the sacred geometric shapes are contained within it, including but not limited to the star tetrahedron, which is one of the 5 Platonic solids, all of which are contained within the flower of life. The 5 shapes shown here are within the fruit of life, also known as Metatron's cube, in the flower of life pattern. Named after the Greek philosopher Plato, each one of these Platonic solids is a polyhedron, which is a solid with flat faces. Each face is of the same size and shape, and all are convex polyhedrons, meaning having many finite points, but not all in the same plane. Ley lines represent the sacred geometric shapes that are contained within the flower of life when the lines are connected to the centers of the circles on the earth, and geometric linear and circular alignments, and geometric linear and circular alignments that were groomed by the ancient civilization to harness and carry currents of electromagnetic earth energy with pockets of concentrated energy at nodal points where they intersect. My life's journey also brought me into awareness of the Moors when I met a Moorish man after moving to Oklahoma City in 2013 and started to receive the information through him on how to interpret what I was seeing in the form of the Moorish paradigm. A paradigm is a framework through which to interpret information. It was then what I was seeing in our world started to make sense. The original ancient advanced Moorish master builders applied sacred geometry in what is called Moorish science or Moorish masonry in creating their infrastructure and communities in harmony, balance, beauty, and unity with each other in the universe. Moor, M-O-O-R, is related to Mur, M-U-'-U-R, or ancient one, going back to the time of Mu, or Lemuria, and are an ancient people living in the present day. They are most definitely still here with us. My own original research on this topic began in 2016 after I found the sacred geometric shape of a star tetrahedron on the North American continent. So the northern apex of this star tetrahedron is in Edmonton in Alberta, Canada. And that was the first that I found, the upper aspect of this, and connected Edmonton to Ottawa, and then down across and back up to Edmonton, and then the lower apex is in Merida, Mexico. And because I knew about sacred geometry and the star tetrahedron, I was able to find this. Otherwise, I wouldn't be talking to you here today, and nothing would have ever happened with this in my life. And this was integral to the beginning of my own original research. So once I found that, I wrote down the cities and places that lined up over long distances in lines and circles in spreadsheets. So this is just a sample of one spreadsheet. I separated it into two halves because it was hard to read when it was all in one. And the blue indicates hot spots in the world where things happen, and the yellow indicates a nodal point on the Earth's grid system. And there are 12 altogether. When I started researching these alignments starting in June of 2018 through blogging, and then making videos for my blog posts, I got an amazing tour of the world of places I had never heard of with remarkable similarities across countries. So again, this is a section of the menu on my website of some of the places that I've looked at and things that I found when I started doing the research, essentially going place to place to place along these alignments that I found and what I found when I looked there. Researching these cities and places in alignment over long distances across the entire surface of the Earth revealed a consistent hand of design across ancient and modern infrastructure and architecture in perfect alignment with each other. And as a result of doing research on these alignments from place to place, the story of an advanced, unified worldwide civilization, what happened to it, who did it, and how it was done, unfolded right before my eyes. So in this slide on the left is a solar alignment on the winter solstice with Keyhole Rock at Pfeiffer Beach at Big Sur in California. And there's examples of these kinds of things all over the Earth. Another one is Durdle Door in England. Same idea. On the winter solstice, you say the same kind of thing. On the right is a view of the Empire State Building in Manhattan through the Manhattan Bridge in Brooklyn. And in the lower section of that photo of the bridge, you can see the Empire State Building right in the middle of it. And this was the first blog post and video that I did after I went through all those places early on in my research. And I just pulled out examples of the same kinds of things from ancient to modern to show this isn't a fluke, and it didn't happen randomly. All over the Earth, you see buildings perfectly framed within an arch. It doesn't matter where you look. I looked all over the Earth and found the same things. And then the same thing in ancient times are so-called natural arches, and through the archway you can see something framed perfectly in the background. So there's something going on here that we haven't been told, and my research has really gone deep into what that is and compiling the information that not only am I sharing here today, but that I share throughout my body of work in the last 7 years. So 7 years this month. Along the way of my coming into doing my own research, I learned about the mathematical work of Carl Monk. Carl Monk deciphered a shared mathematical code in his book, The Code, related to the Great Pyramid of Giza, in the dimensions of the architecture of sacred sites all over the Earth, one which encodes longitude and latitude of each that cross-reference other sites. He turned his findings into the code into a video series that can be found on YouTube. And I highly recommend watching these videos. He's a mathematician. His style is kind of dry, but his findings are absolutely fascinating. And I watched them, I think, before I started even doing my own work years ago. And so again, picking up these puzzle pieces along the way and then kind of going, okay, where do these go? Carl shows that this pyramid code is clearly sophisticated and intentional and perfectly aligned over long distances. The Giza Plateau has been long studied by all different kinds of researchers, and perhaps the starting point for many of us delving into the many mysteries to be found on the Earth. What I am sharing here are just a few of countless examples. The golden ratio can be found throughout the Giza Plateau. Golden ratio, also known as the golden number, golden proportion, or divine proportion, is a ratio between two numbers that equals 1.618, which is the value for phi, the basis of the golden ratio, and found in architecture, the human body, DNA, and nature, among many other places. I have come to believe all the precisely and geometrically placed infrastructure on the Earth was all part of one vast circuit board that, among other things, generated and transmitted free energy. I believe that the circuit board of the Earth's original pyramid-based energy grid system was deliberately blown out within the last couple of hundred years at the most by one or more forms of directed frequency or energy, either at the same time or different times within a finite period, causing the surface of the Earth to undulate and buckle. I believe the civilization we know of as Atlantis sank hundreds of years ago at the most, and not thousands of years ago, as we've been told. What I'm seeing from tracking ley lines all over the Earth, looking from place to place at cities in alignment over long distances, are the consistent presence of swamps, marshes, bogs, deserts, dunes, and places where it appears land masses have sheared off and submerged under the bodies of water we see today. And so in this slide, I just pulled out a section of a ley line that I tracked from the Bermuda Triangle to Lake Itasca in Minnesota, which is the headwaters of the Mississippi River. And this was based on a ley line called the Serpent Ley, which was identified by geographer Peter Champoux. And his website is geometryofplace.com, and I recommend taking a look at it. He's done some amazing work. And somebody had made a suggestion that I look into it when I was on a video series that I was working on. And then I went back and I tracked the whole ley line. And it's interesting because what I'm finding, as I said earlier, is just like the history falls out along these ley lines. And there's an incredible amount of information to be found just in this one alone about our hidden history and how everything was taken over by the 1%, by a small percentage of people that we know, families, names that we've heard. They tell us, they have to tell us, and I'll go into this in just a moment. Again, I'm finding the story hidden away in these ley lines. I believe that those behind the destruction of the energy grid ushered in the creation of a new world order built on top of the ruins of the old world, and that what we think of as modern infrastructure, because that's what we've been told in the official narrative, was actually pre-existing infrastructure, including railways, canals, and lighthouses, among the many examples available to choose from. You name any older building in your community, city, in the world, it was old world architecture, and we've been given a completely different explanation for it. Not only that, but then these malevolent controllers reverse engineered the original energy grid system for the benefit of all life everywhere into what is commonly called the matrix for power and control, as well as the harvesting of energy for the benefit of the very few. I think pockets of original people existed in underground locations, as well as the beings behind this, until enough of the original infrastructure was dug out of the mud flow to restart civilization. Photos from the past often reveal cities with grand architecture being dug out of layers of dirt and rubble. It's most commonly called the mud flood. There's differences of opinion on what we're actually looking at here, but something definitely happened. And you can type mud flood into your search engine and start getting these photographs on your own as a starting point. Or practically empty cities with buildings so large and elaborate that they dwarf the figures in the photos. Findings like these contradict the mainstream story of history. So you've got the tiny, tiny figures in this picture. I believe it's of Paris. And then you've got what looks like a dirt covering over the road or street going through the bottom center of the picture, like something's covering it. I believe that negative beings behind the cataclysm and hostile takeover have executed and implemented an elaborate multi-generational plan comprised of fallen angels, reptilians, archons, demons, and other negative beings with a negative agenda towards humanity, the creator, and creation, all of whom have been interfering egregiously on Earth. They had to do it this way because in a free will zone like Earth, the human beings who live here have to give their consent to choose whether to follow the light or the dark. The only way they can accomplish this acceptance, however, is by outright lies, deception, and duplicity. Because if people knew the true agenda of these controllers, The majority of humanity would never ever accept this. To uncover hidden truths about our world, we must be willing to let go of everything we've been taught and view everything with new eyes. When we do this, the official historical narrative begins to fall apart. A good introduction to the old world are star forts. Star forts have been a gateway subject into the hidden old world civilization for many, including myself. My first introduction to star forts came in 2015 from the video Star Forts or Ancient Power Stations by Sylvia Ivanova of the New Earth YouTube channel. These massive masonry structures, often in star shapes, are found worldwide and are explained to us as military fortifications built for whatever wartime, either before the war or after the war. That's how they're explained to us. Here are just a few examples of many. This is the Kastellet Star Fort in Copenhagen, Denmark, said to have been built after a Swedish attack between 1662 and 1665 on the left, in comparison with the Castle of Good Hope in Cape Town, South Africa on the top right, and Fort McHenry in Baltimore, Maryland on the bottom right. Copenhagen is a straight line distance of 6,201 miles or 9,799 kilometers away from Cape Town, where the Castle of Good Hope was said to have been built by the Dutch East India Company as a fortified replenishment station and military outpost between 1666 and 1679. 1,011 miles or 6,455 kilometers from Baltimore, where Fort McHenry was said to have been built between 1798 and 1800 and designed by the French-born military engineer Jean Francine with the purpose of improving the defenses of the increasingly important Fort of Baltimore. These examples have very similar design features and are located thousands of miles from each other and said to have been constructed for different military purposes at a time in our history when the world was supposedly low technology. In my early research, I wasn't specifically looking for star forts, but I kept finding them along cities and places in alignment with each other and in conjunction with rail and canal infrastructure. Historically, there were often several star forts in close proximity, like these in Pensacola, Florida, adjacent to the Pensacola Naval Air Station. This is how the relationship between these three star forts looks from above. And redoubt is another name given to a fortification. Though many star forts have since been dismantled, abandoned, or destroyed, like this one, what was the Fort of Pensacola, also known as the Presidio Santa Maria de Galvez, I've circled its previous location. I found that location through the coordinates of the former fort on this map. I find it interesting to note that the head of the CSX rail yards was just one block due south of where the Fort of Pensacola was located, which happens to look like a circuit board diagram, which I pictured below it. I think that star forts served as batteries within the original free energy grid. They are even called batteries in many places, like Battery Weed and others at Fort Wadsworth on the Staten Island side of the Verrazano Narrows Bridge, which crosses the Narrows between the lower New York Bay and the upper New York Bay. Fort Hamilton is located right across from Fort Wadsworth on the Brooklyn side of the Verrazano Narrows Bridge. As a matter of fact, when I had occasion to look at the lower and upper New York Bays when I was tracking a long-distance circle alignment in 2019 that started and ended in Washington, D.C., I found 4 past and current pairs of star fort locations, and since then I've found even more former star fort locations in this one area alone. Ellis Island at one time was the location of Fort Gibson, one of 40 forts said to have been built as part of the New York Harbor defense system between 1794 and 1812. One definition of battery is a device that produces electricity that may have several primary or secondary cells arranged in parallel or series, as well as a battery source of energy which provides a push or a voltage of energy to get the current flowing in a circuit. I think this is the reason there are so many star forts that are paired together, or even there's clusters of them, as I found in the same location, so not just pairs. Some places have a lot of them. Another meaning of the word battery is the heavy fire of artillery to saturate an area rather than hit a specific target. It seems like they were repurposed from their original purpose to the second definition applied to them in the new timeline in order for them to appear to have a strictly military function, and as the reason given for both their construction and destruction. As my research along ley lines and their relationship to Earth's original free energy grid has deepened, I have found a considerable amount of evidence to support my belief that not only star forts, but also railroads, canals, bridges, dams, waterfalls, and even ancient giant trees work together in a harmonious worldwide system to harness and distribute free energy for the benefit of all. I consistently find railroads running parallel to S-shaped river bends, with waterfalls and reservoirs along the way connected to hydroelectric power systems, like the New River through the New River Gorge in West Virginia on the top left, alongside the Lehigh River through the Lehigh Gorge in Pennsylvania on the top right. The Royal Gorge Railroad alongside the Arkansas River, going through the Royal Gorge in Colorado on the bottom left, and alongside the Sacramento River through the Sacramento River Canyon in California on the bottom right. These are just a few of countless examples of existing railroads running alongside rivers. This connection between rail and river even connects to considerably older sacred sites like Machu Picchu in Peru, where the railroad runs beside the Urubamba River on its way to Aguas Calientes, the train station for Machu Picchu, and the Great Serpent Mound in Peebles in Adams County, Ohio, suggesting these sacred sites were part of the energy grid as well. The top picture is a screenshot of the location of the Great Serpent Mound on Google Earth on a bend of Brush Creek. The bottom picture is from a 1914 railroad map of Ohio from the Ohio Public Utilities Commission, showing the part of Ohio the Serpent Mound is in, and all the historic rail connections running through here, including the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad along the S-shaped Ohio River, and a railroad line running through the city of Peebles, Ohio. But most of this rail infrastructure was removed and replaced with highways, roadways, and recreational rail trails. So over time, this free energy system has been dismantled or obscured, with rail lines replaced by highways and recreational trails, and electric streetcar systems removed and replaced by roads and gas-powered forms of transportation. This changed the energy flow from what the original integrated energy system was generating to power the electrical grid to human energy. We may not be all of it, but we are definitely part of it. And all of this has definitely been hidden from us when they went about hiding the ancient advanced civilization. So we wouldn't know anything about it or our connection to it. So what I've showed here is the Strava map that when people are wearing fitness devices, it shows up. So that's actually our energy. And it was becoming a real problem at military installations because the service members were wearing these fitness devices and they could see where it was. So why is this relevant today? Well, for one, they're harvesting our energy without our knowledge or consent, and it's going somewhere. Can't say for sure where, but something somewhere is definitely benefiting from it. For another is that they're using the same playbook to take down Western civilization as we know it and replace it with their New World Order. Now they are just flipping the script from what they did to the Old World Order through the systematic application of the Hegelian dialectic of problem, reaction, solution. And so I'm just going to read from this. The Hegelian dialectic is where the ruling elite create a problem, anticipating in advance the reaction of the population to the crisis, and thus conditioning people to call for change. When the population is properly conditioned, the desired agenda of the ruling elite is presenting the solution, or is presented as the solution. The solution they present is not intended to solve the problem, but to serve the basis for a new problem, or exacerbating the existing one. When the newly created problem reaches a boiling point, it becomes the foundation for the people to clamor for the change again. And this process is repeated over and over as all the time moving society towards whatever endpoint they have in mind. Problem, reaction, solution. Here's a list I found of Hegelian dialectic methods of manipulation, which includes obfuscation, worldwide poisoning, or worldview poisoning, primal fears, divide and conquer, indoctrination, controlled opposition, financial systems, control of mass media, food and medicine, illusion of time, the DHR factor, religion/binding, subversive symbolism, and chaos sorcery. And DHR factor, when I looked it up, is a mind control technique used to manipulate people, and the initials stand for denial, harassment, ridicule. And we're seeing a lot of that in today's world in the gaslighting of the public. And actually, all of this sounds very familiar. We've been undergoing a tremendous amount of psychological abuse and trauma collectively as a result of this manipulation. A small number of related elitist family bloodlines, hidden in different nationalities and religions to carry out their plans for world domination, brought into existence a new world built upon the ruins of the old world. and have stolen the legacy and identity of the original people and the true builders of all of the original infrastructure of the earth, claim their legacy as their own, while at the same time robbing us blind of resources, wealth, and energy without us knowing anything about it, because they educated us in a new history with them written into it, and at the same time removed everything about the old world from our collective awareness. They have done innumerable things to prevent the awakening of humanity, which is their biggest fear. Once we wake up, claim our power, and know about their severe crimes against humanity, they are toast. They covertly use methods like chemtrails, fluoridated water, tainted food supply, TV, movies, a controlled media, in an effort to control the population, and that's just naming a few. Their activities are being more and more exposed in the alternative media and the internet. They do death and deception well, and will say and do anything that serves their purposes. But it is getting harder and harder for them to keep their activities hidden, because their high crimes within government and crimes against humanity are being exposed. Yet, in spite of everything they've done to keep us from waking up, it's still happening. And I personally believe there is nothing they can do to stop us from awakening. I want to end my presentation by saying I don't believe the world's elitist controllers will get away with all they have done. I believe their day of reckoning is just around the corner, and that our future will be much better than the future they had planned for us. So that's my presentation on why this is still relevant today.
That's amazing. I love your work. I really do. I find it so positive, and whenever I listen to you speak, I always think of the Garden of Eden. The world just sounds beautiful with all the star forts and the ley lines. I mean, it just must have been absolutely stunning, and still is, actually.
I absolutely believe that, Elizabeth. I would believe it was an amazing civilization, and that the human collective was functioning at a very high level and in higher consciousness, co-creating this beautiful place with the Creator. I definitely believe it was a synchronistic process of what was going on here, and that got robbed. All the words that I used to describe it are accurate. I don't think we've been in this situation for very long at all. And I absolutely believe they're doing the same thing to us now, or they've been trying to do exactly the same thing. That's why they've gone to all this trouble. We're a prize, but they can't just come in and do it.
No, it is very bizarre that they can just come in and do this. You know, it all does feel quite new. And I totally agree with you. Atlantis, Lemuria, it was very recent.
Yeah, that's how we're still living and working in their buildings all over the earth.
Exactly. These are Atlantean buildings. I know.
And when I tracked these places along these alignments that I found, and tracked alignments other people found, the same architecture is everywhere. And on top of that, the sinking of Atlantis happened recently. And the cover-up of it are all of these natural features, estuaries, swamps, deserts, dunes, that they gave us an explanation for. The ice ages. And we see this as a result of natural processes that have been taking place forever. And anybody that talks about sudden cataclysms gets blacklisted and shut down by the establishment, which is only teaching their approved history of the earth.
Yeah.
Which takes away all references to any other possibilities other than what we tell you. But
yeah,
you know, it just takes really looking into it, and thank goodness they gave us the internet, which they gave us to control us, but they had the opposite effect.
I love that.
Oh, humanity!
They can't get us.
So we're the fail-safe, Elizabeth. Yeah. If this was allowed to happen, and maybe it was, so we would go through the hero's journey and come to this awareness on our own, collectively, for the purposes of our evolution moving forward. And we were on a very positive evolutionary path.
Yeah, we were.
So maybe we had to hit rock bottom by this horrendous world, dystopian world that has been foisted on us, that they have gotten into our heads by getting into the educational system and teaching us the history they want us to learn and believe, and showing us movies and giving us books to read and listening to music, reinforcing all of these things that they need us to believe in order to continue raping, robbing, and pillaging. Well, we're distracted and going to work every day, struggling to live in their system, paying them taxes. So it's like the thefts just pile on top of each other, because the system's been rigged to take away our rights, our sovereignty, divine humans, the sovereign beings. And that's why we're the prize, because we are directly connected to the Creator. Creator's not outside of us, and they needed us to believe that. So we would see ourselves as powerless and cut off from each other and evolving from apes. I mean, Darwin was part of it too.
Yeah, I know.
So we wouldn't know who we are, and they could keep doing it. So this tacit consent that we're giving them, they think, because they haven't told us directly, but they've told us indirectly by all these other means. And unfortunately, it's led to widespread harvesting, both of our energy and our blood and our children, and harvesting our fear energy by all of these fear situations that they create for us, false flags. And it's the same playbook. It's like rules for radicals on steroids. Accuse them of what you're doing. Is one of the ones that come to mind.
Yes.
It's like the Truman Show.
We're
We're creating this world that they want us to create instead of this beautiful world that we created before.
Yeah, exactly. And how do you think they created the world? Are we looking at like plasma, shaping plasma, multidimensionality?
I would say there's technologies that we had that were highly advanced. They were maybe creating with the ether, bringing things into existence through our minds, which are that powerful. We are that powerful. That's how come we have this world. We've co-created this scary place with the controllers who don't want us to know that they even exist and call us the conspiracy theorists when they're the part of this multi-generational conspiracy. When they came in, and I believe they found a way to incarnate and brought us the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers, the DuPonts, the Astors, the families that have been behind this.
Well, yes, if we think about it, the fallen angels, they had children. So they have the DNA, they have the same DNA, and you can come in through the DNA. So I know that they say the Nephilim giants, all killed off, but I don't think that they were.
But I also think we were much bigger.
Yes.
And we've been given so much misinformation. It's hard to rummage through everything to try to figure out what we're talking about. But I think we were much bigger. I mean, if you look at the temples in Egypt as the example that comes to mind, the Temple of Luxor especially, but the others as well. And you have these gigantic statues at the entrance. I think we were much, much bigger.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I've noticed that children are getting much bigger again. It's like our DNA has suddenly just sort of shifted. But I mean, I'm going to talk about this in my presentation, but the wave genetics, the wave genetics coming in from the higher frequency, I think it's shifting and unlocking all of our DNA again, which is why, I don't know why these people are still causing so much chaos. I feel like you're right. Their days are numbered. Why are they still, like we said the other night, they don't have an off switch, do they? They don't know how to stop.
They don't, but there's so many differences between where we are now than we were when they were under complete control. The internet's a part of that, but we are in a place in time, whether you look at cycles of time and the Yuga cycle or others as well, where there's higher light coming in now and the Schumann resonance, and it's activating our DNA and upgrading it. And again, this is happening now. So if we look at the idea of the Kali Yuga, this dark age, and going into a golden age, as you are here, and maybe we're there. And so this happened so that we would be ready for the next step moving forward after having gone through this these high crimes against humanity with these beings that think they can do whatever they want. Because I've been tracking these ley lines, I mean, I know things just from the process of recovering that information about how bad it is. It's so bad what they've done. All of the wars of our modern history were these families that were benefiting from both sides of the conflict. And the reasons for them aren't what we've been told. So they were destroying old world architecture and infrastructure during World War I, World War II. I think the Civil War was about the old world and not the war between the states, as we've been told, and the Rothschilds and all those guys were in that too. You trace the backstories and they show up there in a lot of names that were financiers and famous people of the day. And we have financiers today that are behind all of the destruction that we're seeing, financing it and so forth, the riots and so forth. So, and now we have alternative media. So whereas the mainstream media is still pushing the propaganda, the alternative meaning, this information is getting out. And so they've lost control of the narrative, which is hugely important, but they were dug into everything. Every aspect of our lives has their tentacles in it. And so there was no easy fix. So while there are still people that are sound asleep, because this mind control programming that's been going on has been very effective, people are still waking up. Or if it had been completely effective, we wouldn't be waking up at all. So that's really the miracle in all of this, is that in spite of that, we are still waking up, and more all the time. So the majority of people had to be able to see it, even though there's still a section that aren't awake, to bring in whatever the next step looks like. And I don't think we're alone in this. I think we have help. I think things are happening behind the scenes and have been happening behind the scenes throughout all of this to lay the groundwork for bringing these criminals down. And they are criminals. There's no other word for it. High crimes have been committed.
I know. That's why everyone thinks they're not human, because when you look at what they've done, I mean, I don't think any human, a psychopath, maybe psychopath.
And they've been turning humans into psychopaths.
Yes,
but
it's
not enough to make a difference for the outcome, in my opinion. Not enough to make a difference, but they needed that kind of psychopathic human. Look at the Joker archetype as what they wanted for humanity. Insane two personality. One is everyday Joe and the other is an insane psychopathic criminal mind. That's what they've been trying to turn humanity into, to go from the creator, made in the image of God, into this Joker kind of character that they can control and that harms other people. That's the extreme of it. But then we're seeing that today, aren't we? With what's happening in the world and what's getting reported on in the news, and where they're still trying to hang on. But I do think I really believe that we're coming to an end, and that much better things are happening. And I wouldn't say that if I didn't think it. And if I thought the worst was going to happen, I'd get in my prep mobile. I had friends of mine build out a little camper in the back of my GMC Jimmy, and I would head out somewhere with enough food to last me for as much as I could put into it and hang out there, because I've long felt they're not going to get my soul. But from the time that I had my friends build that out, which was in 2018, I've seen things which have given me a great deal of hope, and that I do see the tide turning. And, the fact that we're even able to have this kind of conference, is an indicator that they lost control of the narrative. And without that control, they can't convince enough people that what they're doing is okay, and look somewhere else. It's not what you're seeing. Don't pay attention to what you're seeing, just what we're telling you. Nothing to see here. They don't have that anymore.
No. Well, they're doing a bloody good job of the war, aren't they? People are still very much focused on that, because they're not looking over here at what they're really up to.
It seems that way, but I think on our cyber community, online community, there's more and more people looking for information and looking for answers.
Yes.
And it's the people we know, friends and family, and, the majority of people that are still kind of stuck in the matrix. But for those that are familiar with like the 100th monkey effect and that have studied consciousness, it doesn't take all of us to wake up. It takes enough of us to wake up, to do that shift of the critical mass. We have a shared consciousness, and so the more people that wake up and start asking questions, question the narrative, and withdraw their consent from the system, it does have an exponential effect in the collective.
Yes, it does.
And so we're in that process now of getting this information out there. And I feel like my information is useless to somebody that's not ready for it. It's useless. It's too much. It's too jarring. It's too dissonant. I want to reach the people that are ready for it, because only then is it going to have an impact. Because if somebody's not ready for it, they're going to turn it off. And so I think the same thing with this kind of conference. I think it's going to get out and spread out. And the internet does that.
No.
I mean, when one person's video comes up, like I'll use mine as an example, YouTube recommends similar videos to people, or vice versa. It recommends my video to other people that do similar things. So they can't control that. And, I just think there's a lot more going on here. I mean, considering everything that's been done here, there's miracles every day. I know there is in my life. Synchronicities. Synchronicities are magical. The example off the top of my head is thinking about something and then you hear from them. Maybe you haven't heard from them. Others as well. That's a pretty basic example.
Well, my whole is working faster, I've noticed.
So my whole life has been one big long synchronicity and to get me here to talk about this today and all the work that I've been doing over the last 7 years. Just weird synchronicities have happened, or I say weird, but amazing synchronicities that brought me everything that I needed to know in order to start doing this work. And I left a very difficult relationship in 2006, where after my husband died, I met a man who ended up being a borderline personality disorder. And I thought I was due. I'd been through with my husband through his dying process. I was still grieving a little bit. I went to a grief support group. I met this man who was a widower, a Canadian who would snowbird. I was living in Florida, so he would spend summers in Florida and winters in Canada. And I thought, okay, well, now it's my turn. Well, it turned out he had a lot of problems. And I had to experience that because every experience we ever have helps us, whether we think of it that way at the time or not. So I was in this very difficult situation that I call my dark night of the soul. And Greg Braden was a guide along the way. I had reached a reasonably high level of understanding when I lived in Alaska from 1994 to 1999, connected with a lot of people that I reconnected with when I left this man and returned to Alaska. So a lot of the same people I knew when I went back there in 2006, I had met when I was there in the 90s when my husband and I lived there. And so when I went back in 2006 was when my learning curve went straight up. And the synchronicities, when I really started to get the information I needed to be able to do this work. And I reconnected with these people I had known before. It was actually a group of shamanic practitioners. And so I started learning about shamanism, and then my husband's health went downhill and we moved and I went through my dark night of the soul. But to get back what I was saying, Greg Braden said, you don't have a dark night of the soul until you have all the tools that you need for mastery. And that was the case with me. That bad experience. Had I not had it, I would have stayed exactly where I was. Instead, I was like, okay, I took control of my life back. It's not my life, this man that keeps shoving me down in this little place. No, that's not me. I left that situation, and then it was like,
that's so interesting. But that's like it's like a consciousness explosion, isn't it? I call it like implosion. When life implodes, that's when our consciousness expands.
It's like if I had stayed in that situation, I would have been emotionally abused. I would have been kept shoved down. But I knew that's not who I was.
No. And it prepared you, I suppose, for seeing what's been going on in this world,
It broke me away from that situation, and then I kind of opened up to the flow of the universe when I left. I went back to Alaska, and then all of these different situations came together for me to be able to begin doing this work. So I started actually blogging and making videos in 2018. This was 2006.
Okay.
That I left the situation, moved back to Alaska, reconnected with these friends I had prior. And it was through them that I learned about John Willow Melchizedek's work and Flower of Life. And so I had that exposure to sacred geometry about, I guess it was 2007, I think, when I went to that workshop. And then, things just kept coming in that I needed to be able to do this. And it hasn't stopped, actually. But that was the beginning. I left that relationship. I went back to Alaska. Tsunami of information. But everything I've ever experienced in my life has brought me to doing this. That was the catalyst. But up until that time, I was aware. I was very aware. I wasn't awake yet, but I was very aware of a lot of different things. And I was always a pretty mature teenager growing up, interested in history. So that was my favorite subject. So I learned about their version of history. Went into social work. I was geriatric social worker after I graduated from college. That was my primary career. And so I did nursing home social work and activities. And then I was in that career up until after my husband. So basically organ failure was his cause of death, but he was exposed to Agent Orange when he was in Vietnam in the early 60s or in the 1960s. We didn't know that at the time. So I got right back into the geriatric stuff for about a year and a half after my husband died. And then I left that field for good in around 2000 and 3 or 4. And around that time was when I got in this relationship that was very difficult. And so I had to experience that apparently to get to the point where I just had to be pushed out of my comfort zone and into what I'm doing now. But and those were all parts of my life. And I learned something from everything that ever happened to me. And I think that's true for a lot of us who have the calling to do this kind of work.
I was going to say, do you feel that you came here to do this work and expose these people?
I do. Absolutely. Okay. No doubt in my mind.
And where do you feel this calling from?
My soul. Let's call it a soul mission. I mean, I feel like this is what I came here to do because there's no reason for me to know any of it. And I had a very conventional upbringing. None of this.
I know.
My family is some of the most asleep people that I know. Had I not broken away from all those patterns, I would have been pulled right into it.
Yeah.
And I started breaking away when I joined the Army in 1982. And I joined the Army so I could get money for college. But that set the pattern. Because if I hadn't done that, my mom would be like, come back. But by that time, my pattern had been set of, doing the unexpected, living in different places.
Yeah. And it's so interesting. It does feel like a calling, and it sort of, when you get down to, what you came here to do, it seems to make sense of everything else in your life. Whereas before then, nothing really makes sense.
There's so many things that I remember from growing up that I filed away in the back of my mind, just out of place kinds of things, different aspects of even when I was very young. I give the example, my dad was on the church softball team, and it was like one hill down from the church that I attended growing up, and there was woods behind the softball field. I wasn't interested in the practice. I would go down the woods, and there would be these big, gigantic stones down there that I would play in. And that's really cool. I was before the age of 10. So these were things that happened a long time ago. And then when I started doing this work, it's like, okay. I grew up in Rockville, so they leave us clues everywhere. And this civilization was everywhere. So Stony Hill, Rockville, Rock Hill, Point of Rocks, they're in our city names, our county names, the Moors.
No, I know.
Bones all over them.
By Moors, yeah.
Oh, so that's they've hidden it from us. They didn't tell us about it, but it's still in the names of places because they have to tell us. They're really very cruel, these beings that did this to us.
Yeah.
Heartless.
I don't know. It's like some evil mastermind, isn't it? I mean, it's no wonder they show us all these movies, because we're all sitting here thinking, no, it's just a movie. This can't be real. It's just a movie. But, yeah.
Yeah. And we did talk the other day, and it's like, I cannot watch a scary movie. I can honestly say I have never watched a horror movie. It's like my whole body, when I see something suspenseful, it doesn't even have to be scary, something suspenseful. It's like it reacts. My nervous system reacts like it's really happening. So I can't watch any of that stuff. And in the years leading up to me actually starting to do my own research and blogging and all the things I learned along the way that were fascinating, watching megalithomania presentations, which are organized by Hugh Newman and others, dowsers brought back a lot of this information about the ley lines.
Yes, you're right. Yeah.
And I would watch these presentations with my jaw dropped. The same things in South America that you see in Turkey, and then it started to make sense when I met my Moorish friend and started learning about the Moors and sacred geometry and the application of sacred geometry. Because these same researchers like Hugh Newman would talk about these complex geometries in the landscape. And before I got tuned into this, I went to DEA in 2010 with a friend of mine, and she had actually won a trip, and I'm like, sure, I'd love to go with you. So I was her company. That was a year before I found the megalithomania conferences, but there was a little brown book, I believe it was in one of the museums in London, talking about the grid system. And so I picked it up, a little brown book by Hugh Newman, Gaia's Sacred Sites and things like that, and showing these geometries between these sacred sites in Britain. I was fascinated with it. So this is the kind of information that I've been putting in my head. I haven't watched the television. I couldn't tell you the last time I watched television. Couldn't tell you. Only if it's on when I happen to be in a room. And even then I'm like, because the vibe really bothers me. Visiting my mom, she's wherever she's living. She's in assisted living now, but she has the TV turned up as loud as she possibly can. Mom, I gotta go down the hall. I can't be around it because, it doesn't work for me. And so many people can just watch that stuff and tune out whatever, it's like, I owned a television when I moved back to Alaska, I want to say, so between 2006, 2012. So I would have it on the music. I like instrumental kinds of things, soothing. That would be what I would use it for. So at least prior to 2006 was the last time that I even watched television.
Okay.
So it's been years, and follow up alternative media for news and information and things like that. So as you watch it, it's programming us.
I loved the blog that I saw of yours. In fact, it was a video, because I had always thought that they were natural. And then when you showed all those pictures together, all exactly the same, looking exactly the same, then you realize that none of this is natural. So then when they talk about terraforming the planet in the Sumerian tablets, you think, okay, they really did terraform the planet then.
I believe so. Like I said, with the waterfalls, with the S-shaped rivers that are all over the earth, and you don't have to look further than the Thames.
Yeah, that S-shape.
The Isle of Dogs is right around a bend. The Royal Observatory is right on a bend. This has to do with energy.
Yeah, the Thames in London.
And then you see those exact same shapes on rivers and creeks all across the earth. They had an energy function. Canals. So let's use the Thames as an example. They're masonry banks, man-made. And yet the narrative consistently wants to tell us these rivers are man-made, are natural.
Yeah.
The River Clyde in Scotland. Yeah. And then there's canals nearby. So they're saying, okay, well, these are canals. But these are rivers. And it's like, no, they're not rivers. They're not rivers. They're man-made. They have masonry banks, but they tell us they're natural. But again, that's part of the lie. So many lies. So many lies we're taught. They don't care. They don't care that we believe something, but they've given us so much information and so much misinformation that we are basing our views on BS. Because all they want is our negative energy. And so if we disagree on something, they're getting loose, they're getting what they want, which is why they've been working so hard to suppress the truth and people that tell the truth.
And to make a crappy world, with all the processes and the systems that don't make sense, and all everything's designed to create struggle and difficulties. And it's just astounding, really, isn't it?
So George Orwell was one of their mouthpieces. And all of a sudden in 2024, we're living in 1984. How'd that happen? So when I say, why is this relevant today? What happened to this beautiful world that we've been talking about? They're still at it, but it's our turn. So white over to, skin color. So they divided us by race and religion. So it was like, okay, take out the Moors, replace it with immigrants or, displacing people and moving them somewhere else, and orphan trains or clones or whatever they did to repopulate the earth after they destroyed it. Build it up. They need us part of this. Give us whatever life they've given us, quality of life, from street sweeper to college professor, whatever life, whatever income, and then bring in immigrants to destroy it and turn the whole skin color thing back the other way. So you've been fattened up with white skin. Now we're going to overrun you with darker skin, create all of this chaos sorcery, bring down Western civilization. Maybe they have a breakaway somewhere. Maybe they've got bunker. They don't care what happens here. They've gotten it. They raped and pillaged everything the last, let's say, 200 years-ish. So now it's like, okay, we don't care what happens to humanity. They don't care about what happens to us. It's never been about us. It's been bring about this whole transhumanism and how can they live forever through our energy, which is the direction they were going, and got far advanced in it. So we have to rise. Now is our time. And again, what they have done is so horrible. It can't stand. I choose to believe, and I don't think I'm out in left field, that they're not going to get away with this.
Yeah.
They can't get away with it.
Get away from this sun. Okay, just give up.
And so we're seeing this play out, but it's not going to be in their favor. It's going to be in our favor. And we're in those times. We've got front row seats to watching this play out.
I think everything does. It might start out wrong, like, like we were saying about the internet, these things are brought in for bad reasons and then it becomes good. And I think that shows that you're right. There definitely is some help. We've got some help in whatever format that is, whether it's just, energy or whatever. But there's also there's just something going on behind the scenes. It is what I feel. Higher energies, higher frequencies, alignments, all these sorts of things. I mean, I know it's talked about in, so many of the ancient texts,
Yeah.
But it feels there's something a little bit different now. There's something, I don't know, it feels like everything is shifting.
Agree with you 100%. Things are shifting. May not be as quickly as we'd like, especially those of us that have been awake for a long time, but things are shifting and we get to make that choice. What kind of future do we want? And when you see what kind of future they wanted for us playing out in front of our eyes, say, heck no, I didn't sign up for that. And I could not live with myself, the knowledge that I have, the level of awareness that I have, and not do something. And so that's the motivation behind what I've been doing for the last 7 years and have no intention to stop. I've got a lot of work out there. And it seems like when you go deeper into something, more information comes back. And so the pictures start to come into focus.
I know what you mean.
We're all guided differently, guided very viscerally from all these experiences I've had in my life and the research that I've been called to do. And it may not match research somebody else is doing. And that's okay. That's okay. We don't have to match.
Well, there's so much of it. That's the thing. You just have to your own bit.
There seems to be this human need for everything to match. It's like, it doesn't have to match. We're all doing this from our heart and what we've been guided to do. And I could not do it, nor would I do it if it was coming from outside of me or from somebody else, in terms of the motivation to keep doing it. It's coming from here. And then I get input from different people, different sources. Hey, look at this. What about looking at that? And just that action brings forward information and brings in more pieces of the puzzle. So it really does it takes all of us.
Yes, I think you're right. And maybe that would be a good place to end, because I can see that the next speaker is in the studio. And thank you so much, Michelle, for coming on today. Your work is incredible. It really is absolutely incredible. I mean, honestly, I think what you do is amazing. I'm so pleased that we've managed to speak a few times, because I've got to know you, which, is also amazing as well. Understanding how much passion you feel for doing this, and how it's your purpose. And I meet more and more people in this industry, this field, who are just so heart-led with this. And I feel there has to be a reason for that. We have to be divinely guided in some way. There has to be something behind it. And that gives me a huge amount of hope and inspiration, motivation for the future. And I don't think that it's doom and gloom at all. So thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much for putting all of this together.
Oh, you're welcome. All right. Well, I'll speak to you again soon. Okay. I'm going to let Mr. 76 in now. Okay.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Okay. Bye.